I exercised my freedom of speech, and I was punished for doing so. This should not happen in America. It undermines the constitutional rights for which my grandfather fought for. Mr. Trump has graciously asked me to speak from my heart today, and I need to address some concerns, rumors, and hateful attacks that have been reported about me as recent as this morning.
Welcome back to Hardball. That was Carrie Prejean earlier today. She is still Miss California, despite some racy photos that emerged on the internet and allegations that Prejean violated her pageant contract by denying any such photos existed. Critics say Prejean also violated her pageant contract by helping a political organization. Just a few weeks ago, Prejean appeared with a group running ads against gay marriage. And so while today's news conference with Donald Trump resolved the issue of Prejean's Miss California crown, it served once again to light a fire over the gay marriage debate and the arguments on both sides. Joining us now, Peter Sprigg, Senior Fellow at the Family Research Council, and Joe Solmonese, who is a president of the Human Rights Campaign. Sorry about that mispronunciation. First question to both of you. Which one of you has been helped or hurt more by the way this whole gay marriage debate has essentially emerged in the context of a Miss USA pageant? Peter?
Well, I think what this has illustrated is, it's what's astonishing to me about this whole incident is that it's considered controversial for Miss California to express a viewpoint which is shared by the majority of Americans and the majority of Californians, namely that marriage should be the union of a man and a woman. But what I think it's revealed is that while we're accused of hate and so forth for expressing that view, the hate is really on the other side. And the story should really be about Perez Hilton and how vicious he was to her in his comments about her after the pageant, rather than being about Carrie Prejean and what she said.
Joe?
I don't think that Miss California has had much impact one way or the other on the fight for marriage equality in this country. But what I think is interesting is, and you know, their side knows this and our side knows this, is that if you're under 40 years old in this country, an overwhelming majority of Americans support marriage equality. If you're under 30, they don't even know why you're asking the question. The number goes through the roof. So I suppose, you know, maybe Miss California is an attempt to inject a younger face into that debate to try to change those numbers. If that's the case and that's the best they can do, I certainly welcome her to the debate.
Well, and that raises the question, Peter, has Miss California been a good spokesperson of sorts for the position that you share?
Well, Miss California is not a trained media spokesperson, and she's not trained policy expert on same-sex marriage. That's true, but she has gotten more media attention than most of us will, perhaps in our lifetime in the last couple of weeks. Yeah, well, that's perhaps unfortunate. But I think what she represents is she's almost a martyr, in a sense, for the traditional values movement, and she shows that even the freedom to speak of people who hold traditional values is threatened by this same-sex marriage movement, and this is what's really alarming.
Somebody who participates in a beauty pageant, gets some of their help for various issues, speaks her mind, people disagree with her, she goes and helps with a political campaign against gay marriage and gets criticized for it, she's a martyr?
Well, because of how viciously she was attacked, in particular by Perez Hilton, who set this whole thing off, but throughout the blogosphere by a number of gay bloggers and so forth, who acted as though she was saying something hateful and bigoted when all she was doing was expressing the majority viewpoint in this country.
Well, look, the big news today is she got to keep her crown. So, unfortunately, I think it overshadows the more important developments, which are that, you know, in the last few weeks or so, we've seen the state of Iowa moved to marriage equality. Vermont, the legislature, the people's enacted legislature in Vermont overrode the governor's veto. The governor of Maine signed a marriage bill. The governor of New Hampshire is posed to sign a marriage bill. In pretty short order, New York and New Jersey are going to move to marriage equality. And what we see in those states is that life remains the same and nothing changes. It doesn't change for the marriages of heterosexual couples. They enjoy the same joys and the same hardships and the same challenges they've always had.
Well, life doesn't remain the same. I mean, Catholic Charities, which had provided adoption services for years in Massachusetts, is no longer permitted to provide adoption services because
which was
they
a choice Catholic Charities made.
They declined to offer them to same-sex couples. The schools teach same-sex marriage in Massachusetts from kindergarten on up, which is something that in California in the Prop 8 campaign they denied would happen, but it's happened in Massachusetts.
Religious institutions are not required to perform same-sex marriages. And when religious institutions get into the business of adoption, get into the business of, renting out space, as the church in New Jersey did for functions, then they have to adhere to the laws in those states. Catholic Charities had been doing adoptions to same-sex couples for an awfully long time before they decided to get out of the adoption business in the state of Massachusetts. The fact is that children are suffering, though. The children who could have been helped by Catholic Charities are no longer receiving that.
But aren't children suffering who have parents who may be of the same sex, who love each other, who want to enter into the conservative institution of marriage and want to have their parents essentially be the same somewhat as the kids down the block? I mean, don't those kids suffer as well?
Well, ultimately, the children suffer when they don't have the opportunity to be raised by their own biological mother and father who are committed to one another in a lifelong union. And that's the purpose of marriage. The fundamental purpose of marriage as a social institution is to bring together men and women for the reproduction of the human race.
So then if somebody's older, or if they can't reproduce for whatever reason, if somebody's older, they don't want to have kids, they can't reproduce, we should keep them from getting married, right?
Well, no, it's not that that's mandatory, but it is that is the fundamental purpose of marriage, and it undermines that purpose to grant marriage licenses to an entire type of couple that never, ever have the opportunity to naturally reproduce.
In this day and age, the fundamental principle of marriage is about love and about celebrating a long-term committed relationship. And, every reasonable study that I have seen shows that children flourish in loving, supporting households, whether those are in the households of same-sex couples or opposite-sex couples.
Well, actually, the research shows that children do best when raised by their own biological mother and father who are committed to one another in a lifelong marriage. That social science research is overwhelming.
Real quick question. Should Barack Obama make the issue of gay marriage something that he evaluates or that the Senate evaluates in terms of his judge, his pick for the Supreme Court? Should we have a right to know where this particular judge stands on the issue of gay marriage before the Senate Judiciary Committee starts voting on that person?
Well, I'm reluctant to say that there should be a litmus test on any issue. The litmus test should be the person's judicial philosophy. But we certainly believe that philosophy should be one of respect for the original intent of the Constitution, and the Constitution says nothing about same-sex marriage.
Joe?
Well, President Obama has said that he's going to evaluate the merits of these candidates on, the degree to which they're empathetic to the circumstances of the lives of the American people, and so I take him at his word.
Joe Solmonese from the Human Rights Campaign and Peter Sprigg from the Family Research Council. Interesting conversation. We appreciate you both coming in today.
Thank you.
Up next.